Dear friends from the Office of Research and Analysis at the Arts Endowment, please welcome Patricia Mullaney-Loss.
Good morning, everybody. And again, welcome to a presentation on research, innovation, and the arts, NEA Research Labs. I'm Patricia Mullaney-Loss, a program analyst in the Office of Research and Analysis at the National Endowment for the Arts. I have longer, curly, dark hair, and I'm wearing a white top in front of a NEA background. I'm joined today by my colleague, Melissa Menzer, Senior Program Analyst within the Office of Research and Analysis, and two exceptional researchers who I'll introduce in a moment. I first want to thank Hbcus and the White House Initiative for inviting us to speak at the National HBCU Week conference this year. Just a housekeeping item before we get started, please use the Q&A box for any questions throughout the presentation. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. And we'll also try to answer perhaps some questions as they come through. So today we'll be sharing examples of two of our NEA Research Lab award recipients and how they've formed transdisciplinary research teams that have pioneering tools and methods using the arts and cross-sector dialogue with fields related to healthcare, innovation, and technology. First, we'll hear from Dr. Robert Bilder, who runs the NEA Research Lab at the University of California, Los Angeles. Then we'll hear from Dr. Aston McCullough, who leads Lab Sync, an NEA Research Lab at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Then I will take some time to share the nuts and bolts of securing federal funding to support partnerships for research in the arts from the National Endowment for the Arts after these two fabulous presenters give their talks. We'll then take some time at the end for Q&A. Before I pass it on to our presenters, I do want to talk a little bit about the NEA. The National Endowment for the Arts was established by Congress in 1965, and it is an independent federal agency that is the largest funder of the arts and arts education in communities nationwide, and a catalyst of public and private support for the arts. By advancing equitable opportunities for arts participation and practice, the NEA fosters and sustains an environment in which the arts benefit everyone in the United States. The NEA's primary activities include grant making to nonprofit arts organizations, public arts agencies and organizations, and individual writers and translators. NEA funding is appropriated by Congress each year. We directly award over 2,000 grants annually that support our mission and goals to organizations of all sizes across 50 states and 6 US territories. These awards are made in all artistic disciplines such as performing arts, visual arts, multidisciplinary arts, literature, arts education, other partnerships, and of course, research, which we'll be focusing on today. Our website, www.arts.gov, includes program guidelines, application deadlines, and other details about applying for support. I wanted to hone in on what we'll be talking about today, and you'll get more details on this in a moment after we hear from our speakers. But I briefly want to mention that there are 2 grants programs as part of our NEA Research Awards, where the focus of the project is on conducting research or studies on the value and the impact of the arts for individuals and societies. NEA Research Grants funds research studies that investigate the value and or impact of the arts, whether as individual components of the US arts ecology or as they interact with each other and or other domains of American life. NEA Research Labs funds transdisciplinary research teams grounded in the social and behavioral sciences, yielding empirical insights about the arts for the benefit of arts and non-art sectors alike. So we'll be focused on this program today, and now we'll hear from 2 of our current NEA labs about their innovative work at the intersection between arts and other fields. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bilder, who is a distinguished professor and chief of the Division of Psychology in Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences, and is the Michael E. Tannenbaum Family Chair in Creativity Research at UCLA, where he directs the Tannenbaum Center for Biology of Creativity, the National Neuropsychology Network, and is the principal investigator for an NEA Research Lab. Dr. Bilder holds a PhD in psychology from the City University of New York where he specialized in human neuropsychology. Dr. Bilder specializes in the neuroanatomic and neuropsychological basis of major mental illnesses. So over to you, Bob, and I will stop my screen share right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Patricia. And thank you to the National Endowment for the Arts and also the HBCU Conference Week for letting us share some of our work. For those who can't see me on the screen, I'm pale, have gray hair that's tinged with light brown. I like to think it looks like a blonder, youthful kind of version of myself. And behind me, I have some art that's blurred, including a Dymaxion projection from Buckminster Fuller that represents the entire Earth in equidistant manner. And then, of course, a poster of Barack Obama, 2008. Anyhow, that's what happens when I'm at home. I have to apologize in advance. My German Shepherd is home with me. He just had surgery. He may bark at some point, but maybe not. So we'll see how it goes. So let me see if I can share some images. Yeah, I'd like to talk about the NEA Research Lab at UCLA. We're really excited to be working on this project. And our goal was to develop a reliable, valid, and flexible and scalable arts impact measurement system. One of the things that is always a concern is trying to come up with great evidence of the impact of the arts on well-being. And we feel that, aligned with some of the mission of the NEA, we really were hoping that it might help if we could get data easily collected by arts organizations and arts organizers so that those data could be pooled together and amassed so that we could help to highlight the value of the arts to those who may not see it immediately. Then we're interested in implementing some of these new methods in keystone studies to show how the system works, show that it can be adapted in different settings, and to try to understand the psychological mechanisms that underlie the art's impact on well-being. I think the bottom line is most of us who've been doing research in this area believe that the arts have a positive impact on health and well-being, yet the exact mechanisms through which looking at art, listening to music, other experiences of the arts actually generate those well-being outcomes remains largely unknown. So we're hoping to contribute a small piece to that. For those who are considering applying to the NEA, may be interested in the priority research topics. And we were really focused on topic one, which is indicated there as a little ruler. It's what are the measurable impacts of the arts? And we're particularly interested in trying to understand the first one of the kinds of impacts, which is about health and wellness for individuals with a particular focus on the psychological well-being outcomes. We've actually had some ideas about sort of getting into cognition and learning. I'm really interested in that because I'm a neuropsychologist. And so we may be doing some of that as well. We think we can do it with the same platform, but we're really trying to understand how we could create a system where people could easily indicate psychological well-being factors after their arts experiences. So as a first step of this, we tried to understand from the health perspective, not from the arts perspective, what are the kinds of outcomes that the National Institutes of Health or the Centers for Disease Control are interested in. And so we surveyed a bunch of the different kinds of concepts that they're interested in. And among those, there's the National Institute of Mental Health. There are various indicators of physical health that are studied by the NIH. There are various indicators of social health and of well-being that have been identified by the NIH and the CDC. But some of the key areas that we decided it would be best to focus on are trying to find ways to measure meaning and purpose in life, to look at positive and negative affect, look at self-efficacy, and then in social health, participation in social roles and activities, and other indicators of social emotional well-being. These are some of the key domains that we focused on to see, well, how could we actually get folks involved in indicating how they're doing in these domains when they go to an arts event, and how has the arts event actually impacted these areas? And so there are a number of different models of psychological well-being. I present here just an older slide that comes from Carol Riff and Burton Singer that identified 6 main domains that have been considered important for psychological well-being. And they include self-acceptance, finding purpose and meaning in life, environmental mastery, autonomy, personal growth, and positive relationships. So we, with this kind of a framework in mind, started going through and identifying through the literature all the different ways that we could measure these using self-report rating scales and other indicators of these concepts. One of the things that was striking from studying this literature, and I know everyone in the audience probably loves a good structural equation model, and you're probably going to be disappointed that I'm not going to delve into all of the math that goes into the structural equation model shown here. But the bottom line of this is to show that when people do big studies of these concepts, they basically find a big dimension of psychological well-being, a highly correlated dimension of subjective well-being. And in some ways, the subjective well-being really boils down to positive and negative affect and life satisfaction, whereas psychological well-being has some additional contributions from these other 6 domains, as we saw before. The bottom line is these things all tend to be pretty highly correlated with each other, and just getting measures of positive, negative affect and social connectedness gets us a long way to measuring the big space of psychological well-being. So we really focused on those dimensions to start. Now, one of the things that, I'm just highlighting here, the primary components that we decided to focus on included a positive and negative affect scale, which has been widely used for decades. Because social connectedness represents a somewhat independent domain, we also revised a scale that's been widely used called the social connectedness scale that looks at how we feel about ourselves in connection to others. And then we have been experimenting with some other ways to collect data in ways that are really fast and give more information. And I'll show you an example of an affect grid that lets us look at the sort of positive and negative affect domain and arousal at the same time. And then I'd like to just mention some of the work we're doing with voice recordings, where we can look both at the words that people say, what we call semantic analysis, and we can look at the sound that people are making when they speak or make other utterances, including singing, which we can do using acoustic analysis. We can actually look at the sound features and try to extract the meaning from that. We've been lucky to have a collaborator, Armin Arevian at UCLA, who developed what he calls Chorus, a Chorus platform. It's basically an innovative platform. It's an app that develops apps. So it makes it easy to rapidly develop new apps. And we have a little demo that you could check out. I put up on the screen, there's a QR code and there's a URL there. And I don't know if it's possible to throw that URL also into the chat if people wanted to go and see what it feels like to use the Arts Impact Measurement System. We just gave a couple of quick examples there. But in brief, what you'll see there is a social connectedness scale. And so there are little sliders where you can indicate how you feel right now. If you feel like you really belong, if you feel together with your peers, you can slide it over to strongly agree, etc. And then these are examples of the positive and negative affect scale questions. So you can indicate right now how enthusiastic, nervous, inspired, or distressed you feel. Interestingly, just by answering even like these 4 questions from the PANAS, the positive negative affect scale, it gives us a relatively reliable indicator of your affect balance, of how positive or negative your affect may be right at this moment. Now, one of the other things that I think is a more innovative aspect we've been able to implement with the collaboration of our great colleague, Ariana Anderson. Ariana has done some amazing work in neuroimaging and other areas, artificial intelligence, machine learning. But one of her developed apps is called Chatter Baby. So she developed an app that you can put a recording of your baby's vocalizations, and it will tell you whether the baby is hungry, happy, sad, or angry. Just using machine learning algorithms, she's developed a way to decode the actual sounds of the baby's vocalizations and determine what those states are. Now, we're interested not in recording babies, but in recording real world people's feelings as they experience arts events. So we give people the opportunity to click and record a brief audio about how they're feeling or how inspired they may feel by a particular arts event. And they can speak as long as they like. Typically, they speak for less than about a minute, but then we're able to dig in. We can take the words that they say, and just by analyzing the words that people use, we can make determinations about their affect and current emotional state. And then we also are developing algorithms to analyze the sounds that they are making, to look at the pauses in the flow of their speech, to look at the modulation of their speech, to see how much variation in tone there may be, to see whether there are other stresses in the vocal apparatus that may be associated with physiologic stress. So in this way, we think we're not just rediscovering the kinds of psychological concepts that have been explored long before, but may be able to discover new features of human expression that will tell us even more about the impact of the arts. Now, along those lines, we also have an affect grid. So this is a neat thing because it basically enables just to touch the screen or use your mouse or a cursor and just put on the screen a little point indicating how positive or happy you feel and how energetic or excited you feel with a single key press. So within a second, you can provide an indication of how you feel at a particular point in time. And the location where you press is encoded in a way that lets us identify both variables just with a single press. So that's sort of a cool thing. So anyhow, please go ahead and give it a try. Now, another thing that I just want to mention, another goal of our NEA Research Lab is to identify a lot of content so that arts organizers can pick from more than just the positive and negative affect scale and the social connectedness scale. And so we developed a scale bank and a validity bank where we so far have accumulated more than 180 different rating scales about psychological well-being with more than 5,000 items. And for each scale, we have lots of information about how many items there are, what are the items, whether it's an open source or there's some permissions that are needed to use it, what domains of psychological functioning people believe that they're measuring, and other psychometric information that's useful to design research studies. So this enables anyone in the world to use any of these scales. We submitted this to the UCLA Institutional Review Board so that anything that's already been approved by the IRB can be deployed right away by an arts organization. So basically, if an arts organization wants to set up a study, basically we can help them set up their project to rate. They can get a QR code, just like I showed in an earlier slide, and people coming to the event can scan it, and then they can provide responses about their arts event. We've also constructed a validity bank that gives us a summary of the literature on existing scales. So this can help you determine which scale do you want to use based on the prior research literature, indicating how valid that scale was in measuring different kinds of features or in assessing the impact of arts in prior research. And we hope that that bank will be expanding greatly as the work on the arts continues. Just to give you an example of some of the work that we've done, we've been able to collaborate with a fantastic and amazing UCLA researcher. His name is Kenneth Wells. This is a person who, in addition to his large academic portfolio, writes operas in his spare time. So he's created a number of them. He created the Veteran Journeys opera in order to try to understand better the problems of housing insecurity and post-traumatic stress disorder faced by veterans returning from foreign conflicts. And so he created a libretto and engaged singers who did an online performance to try to make more accessible the experiences of folks who've been experiencing these problems and to increase the willingness to engage with people who are suffering from PTSD and homelessness. As you may know, there's a degree of stigma that's long been associated with some of these problems, and overcoming that stigma is one of the potential impacts of the arts. So we have a paper now that's in press in the Psychology of Aesthetics, Creativity, and the Arts, which gives you more details about this. Indeed, we found that the opera increased willingness to engage with veterans. That increased significantly just by exposure to the opera. We also found that changes in the willingness to engage was associated with positive affect increases and social connectedness feelings. And this slide just gives you another window on that. We were able to use the AIM system at the Sound Health Network's inaugural convening. The Sound Health Network brings together members of various NEA Research Labs and other NIH projects focused on the arts and well-being. And we were able to show during that event that positive affect and social connectedness also increased and negative affect decreased from before to after the event. There were pretty big effects of that. They were particularly interested in whether people were going to experience awe by an awe-inspiring arts work that was presented there. Indeed, people's ratings of awe correlated quite strongly with their, valence, positive valence, less so with arousal. But it's quite interesting to see how concepts like awe can be measured reliably. We have some other projects. We're working with a great guy, Daniel Seif, who, in addition to being an amazing bass player, runs the Herbie Hancock Institute of Jazz Institute at the UCLA. And we're working with the Los Angeles Unified School District in their Beyond the Bell program to understand how the students are benefiting from an arts and jazz program that they're conducting in the after school program there. And then we're also involved with Stephen Angel, an amazing guy who was once a drummer with Jimi Hendrix when he was when Stephen was a kid. Jimi Hendrix was a little older, but anyhow, he started a life skills drumming program, and we're working together with clients of the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. Sometimes people with severe mental illness who go through a series of lessons about trust, responsibility, all engaged in participatory drumming. And so this is really a fantastic, interesting program, and we're trying to get a handle on what impact this program has on the participants. We look at them before and after and get all kinds of measures on the folks who are participating in this program. And we don't have any results on that yet, but I hope we will soon. We just started within the last couple of weeks on that. So anyhow, that's a brief overview. I just want to highlight the members that we've been working with on our team. There's Armin Arevian, Ariana Anderson, Daniel Seif, who I've mentioned, and then the irreplaceable Marissa Stinnett, who coordinates our project and without whom none of this work could possibly have been done. So thank you for listening and look forward to getting questions later. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Dr. Bilder. So now we have our second presenter. We'll hear from Dr. McCullough, who's Assistant Professor of Dance Science at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the Principal Investigator for Lab Sync, an NEA Research Lab. Dr. McCullough studies human activity in relation to health across the lifespan. He examines associations between wellness and dance exposures, both quantitatively and qualitatively, and is a contemporary improvisational dancer and dance maker. Dr. McCullough holds a PhD and MPhil degrees in kinesiology from Columbia University, an MS in applied statistics from Columbia University Teachers College, and an MA in dance education from New York University. So over to you, Dr. McCullough. Stop my share.
Hello, and thank you, Patricia. I'm excited to be here. My name is Aston McCullough, and I am a man with a goatee and black glasses, wearing a black suit with a black tie and a dark gray shirt. And I'm excited to be sharing work from Laboratory for the Scientific Study of Dance, or LabSync, which is investigating dance at the intersection of health science and technology. We are interested in evaluating existing methods for quantifying dance exposures. In the lab, we develop, test, and disseminate new methods for quantifying dance exposures. We test associations between dance exposures and physiological, functional, and mental health outcomes across the lifespan. And finally, we are interested in understanding both quantitatively and qualitatively within contexts where there are multiple dancers or a single dancer, people's experiences and their relationships between experience and health outcomes. As an NEA Research Lab, we are specifically developing computer vision algorithms for quantifying dance exposures. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. And we're doing the same for wearable sensors. And we're also developing and testing new methods for self-reporting measures of dance exposures across the lifespan and also state measures. Finally, we're interested in testing associations between lifetime exposures to dance and both physiological and mental health outcomes. I'll only be talking about our technological innovations today, so I won't be talking too much about the work that we're doing in terms of the health outcomes, but I'm happy to answer any questions about those at the end of this talk, if that's of interest. So before I dive into what we're doing in the lab, I kind of want to set the stage for those who are less familiar with how broad dance is as a domain of behavior. I just want to give some windows into what we're thinking about when we're trying to quantify dance. So first, in terms of dance being multiple, sort of crossing multiple domains of anaerobic activity, yes, dance can be anaerobic activity, but it isn't always. Dance can also be aerobic activity, but it also isn't always that. Dance can also be resistance training, but it also isn't always that. And so when you're trying to quantify something that sort of is a moving target, if you will, or can be multiple things, that's one factor that we're trying to consider in the lab. And these images are showing some of my collaborators and also me dancing in the lab. So I'll talk about this more at the end of the talk, not only quantifying dance, but then putting to test what we're experiencing in the lab in the studio. So just to continue setting the stage, can dance be virtuosic and grand sorts of behaviors? And yes, it can. We know that typically when we think of dance, we think of high kicks and leaps and jumps, but at the same time, dance can be everyday or quotidian actions and gestures. So we can make dances about drinking water. We can make dances about walking across the street. And those behaviors are also dance. So in terms of thinking about the scope of those actions, from being quite big actions to quite small actions, that's another consideration that we as a lab have to take into account when developing these algorithms to quantify dance behavior. And then beyond sort of the things that we typically consider to be what people are doing in the world and what people are doing in the context of dance, dance can also hold within it these atypical expressions of human behavior. And so we have some examples of this as well. And so again, when we're trying to think about systems to quantify dance across multiple contexts, there's quite a lot that we have to be considering as a research group. So it's not an easy problem to solve. So why are we doing it? Well, as was indicated in the prior talk, we know in general that dance is good for health. Those who are dancers or who have experienced dance have first-person experience of that. Those who are interested in the literature, we can read about this. So looking at a paper from the Arts and Psychotherapy from 2014, a meta-analysis showed that dance decreases depression, leads to decreases in anxiety and improves self-reported quality of life. And I just highlighted that we're looking specifically at dance and not dance movement therapy when I'm pulling out these results. So that's why that's highlighted there. Another study from the sports medicine in 2018 showed that dance shows health benefits in terms of flexibility and balance when compared to other forms of physical activity. So dance confers special benefits on health. Similarly, when compared to other forms of activity, dance showed improved serum triglyceride profiles in participants and was associated with lower total fat mass. In a recent paper that just came out in the American Journal of Dance Therapy, this paper sort of continued the evidence that was shown on the previous slide and then added to it by further suggesting that dance may lead to increased bone density. And they were looking specifically in that paper at square dancing leads to decreased perceived stress. And in that study, they were looking at African dance. They decreased cortisol. And I want to highlight in this study that the 20% reduction in salivary cortisol that they measured was specifically noted when there was partner dance and with music. So they looked at several different conditions and they saw that there were differential effects on cortisol based upon those different conditions. And then finally, in that paper, looking at dance specifically and leaving the dance movement therapy results separated from these, the dance was associated with improved HDL or good cholesterol profile, and that was just general dancing. They didn't really indicate what type of dance. So this highlights just one more factor, is just that there are lots of different types of dance. And so that's another factor that we're considering. And again, this is why we're interested in looking at dance, is because dance leads to these health outcomes. One other large-scale epidemiological study showed a few years back that participating in dance leads to lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality. In our lab, we consider that dance is perhaps the most accessible mode of physical activity. We consider everyone to be a dancer. There are no non-dancers. Everyone can dance. You don't really even need to be walking to dance. You can be lying down and dancing. So really, we think of it as being a really incredibly accessible intervention potentially, but just a mode of activity. And then finally, we need to have better ways or good ways of quantifying dance behavior in order to better understand the dose response effect between dance exposures and health outcomes. And that's, to the previous talk's point, what we are also interested in doing in our lab to help move the field forward and to help us to better say with science what we know from experience in the arts. So I just want to say very briefly some of the ways that dance is currently being measured or quantified. And this is just sort of a slide with lots of different things going on. But if you just look at the bullet points, basically, people are generally using validated self-report questionnaires. They're using direct observation methods, which I include any type of dance notation within that. So this is really someone watching the dance and then notating or using some other codified system to annotate the behaviors that one is observing. Then people are using technology as well. So then you're looking at wearable devices like accelerometers, gyroscopes, heart rate monitors, and others. And there's just an example of that kind of device up here, and someone, just different places you could put those devices typically. This is an example of Laban notation and Laban and some other forms of notation I'm trying to just show with my cursor, but I'm realizing it's not showing up here. Do you see it now? Yes, we do. So this is the notation. This is Laban notation. This is a sensor here. And this is someone wearing the sensor. People are using embedded IMU systems. So this person here is wearing a suit that has basically a bunch of accelerometers and gyroscopes in the suit. And that's a way to quantify activity. And then people are also, of course, using video-based motion capture. So this is what is currently in vogue in the field. And these are the methods that I just sort of suggested. I added another one up there. Even though qualitative methods aren't quite quantifying, it's important to, I think, include that. So I've just sort of listed that there as I am a mixed methods researcher. So some issues exist, and basically it's that there are multiple competing methods. And so that causes an issue, which I'll get to at the end, which is a generalizability issue. We also know that some measures have not been validated for dance. So there are some papers that are using methods that have been validated for things like walking or other types of behavior that might not accurately quantify dance. It's sort of the best option available in most cases, just because there aren't a lot of methods to quantify dance that have been validated in terms of energy expenditure estimates. Some research groups are using unvalidated methods, like I just said before. Many researchers are creating algorithms for specific dance styles, which is useful and interesting and perhaps necessary, but sort of cumulatively or altogether, this leads to issues of groups using different methods that may not measure dance in similar ways, which causes this divergence issue where multiple groups are doing different things, and it makes it difficult for us as a field to say exactly the impact of dance if everyone's measuring it differently. And so it's an issue of generalizability ultimately. So we're interested in addressing that by creating methods that the field can use, and I'll talk about some of those now. So I just wanted to give one quick example of a ground truth measure that we have from the lab. And this is one of our collaborators, Jenna Regal, dancing in the lab wearing an indirect calorimeter, which we use as a way to estimate energy expenditure. And on the left-hand side of the screen, on the vertical axis, you just see metabolic equivalence in units of 3.5 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. And then along the horizontal axis, you just see different activities. And so basically, just due to time, if we're looking at these dance-based activities, they're pretty intense. This dotted line is looking at vigorous. So even when people are trying to do their own moderate dancing, that they're selecting out their own intensities, they're typically doing vigorous dancing. So in general, dance is looking like it's vigorous in our lab. This is in preparation. So we're looking at these data in 72 people. So we're on our way there as a lab, and we're excited to share these results when we finally have them. I'll try to just share a little bit about some of the apps that our group is publishing this year. And all these apps will be available online via our website. And the only sort of thing is that you should use a Google Chrome browser, and otherwise they are platform agnostic. So this is just an app that is intended to increase availability to technologies and algorithms that are required to calibrate sensors. And so this particular example is just showing how one would calibrate a wearable IMU data set. So these are just some data that have been imported, and these are actigraph data from an actigraph wearable device, which is one of the devices I showed previously and one of the devices that we use in our lab. Then what you can do is visualize the calibration results for each respective device. And I'll explain as this video continues sort of what you're seeing here. So when you show the estimates, you'll get this sort of perfect calibration frame here, which is more or less a sphere. And that's the orange object in the space. The blue sort of partial ellipsoid are the observed data. And as you sort of look at it, you basically want to make sure that most of the points that are blue are inside the orange sphere. Depending on the orientation, it looks more or less spherical, but it is a sphere. And so that's showing that. And then this is just showing an example of data that would need to be calibrated. Obviously, there's quite a large error relative to the calibration frame. And this is showing sort of a similar process, but for 2D data. So if you're using video data, you can import your video data, your 2D video data, and you can calibrate your system and using a checkerboard image, and our software does all of the computation for you, and you basically just put your images in, and you want to make sure that the dots are aligned with the vertices, and that's basically that. And you'll get a report that basically says if you want to do additional work there. I'm going to just sort of scoot along. This is an app that does signal processing for wearable devices, and I'll just sort of move forward to show. Video is stuck. Okay, that video was stuck. I'm just going to scoot past. This is another app that is for generating ground truth labels for learning algorithms, for deep learning algorithms. It uses a comprehensive preset library of motor behavior codes that one can use to apply the labels to your video data. You can include additional codes that are specific to your protocol. And that's another possibility for the user. And then you are also able to conduct exploratory kinematic analyses, which are useful for teaching and preliminary review of data. Basically, for this, as you can see, you're choosing a code, and then you can apply that code to the data. You can also do some exploratory kinematic analyses. And I'll just add that presently, we are implementing an automated version for the kinematic analyses using deep learning, and that should be available early next year. And I'll just sort of scoot on to the computer vision. So this is an example of an older 2D or the 3D computer vision algorithm, and it's showing basically the vector magnitude of the accelerations in each of these orthogonal axes. And then moving on, this is showing some 3D data. This is me dancing in the lab with a 3D camera. And these data we're currently also processing so that the 3D data are rendered in a 3D space. As you can see on the right-hand side, this is Jenna Regal again, dancing in the lab. And then this is a cleaned up version of that. So we're doing the signal processing, and this was available in one of the apps as well. So you can input your 3D data and get the object of interest out. And then I'll just sort of scoot forward to this last thing and then I have to wrap it up. We're also doing this for multiple cameras. So this is showing an estimate here of the acceleration vector magnitude. And this is a slowed down image of multiple cameras seeing the same thing. And this is going to improve, obviously, the accuracy of the camera estimates of the acceleration vector magnitude, which we are using the ground truth again to calibrate these to estimate energy expenditure from these video-based data. And we're making all of this that we're doing in the lab, as I mentioned before, into a dance that will be performed in February. So the algorithms and the work that we're doing in the lab are translated into performance, and that is something that we're excited to share more about in the coming months. So thank you for your time and attention, and as well to all of the collaborators and lab members, and again to the NEA and HBCU for this invitation.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCullough, and thank you both so much for sharing your work, because it's really exciting to not only see that you're pioneering new techniques, but you're also able to share that with other people. And that's sort of one of the goals of both of your work, is to be able to disseminate that learning and new technology to other users and other practitioners. So I will share my screen and just go through, hopefully quickly, to leave some time for Q&A, more about our grant opportunities. So let's see here. We again support two programs: NEA Research Grants for one-time research projects and NEA Research Labs for longer-term agendas. So for the two principal investigators that just spoke, they have these longer-term agendas, and they're able to have a centralized hub in order to conduct multiple different research studies. And then we also have opportunities for people who want to just do one-time research studies. Before I get into more of the nitty-gritty about these two different programs, I wanted to take a step back and talk about the types of research we support. You saw two examples of the types of research that we are supporting, but there is a lot more, and a lot more that we currently support and that we want to support in the future. Let's see here. So the Office of Research and Analysis released a new NEA Research Agenda outlining key research topics that will guide our work in grant making over the next 5 years. The NEA plans to rely heavily on our research awards programs to fulfill our goals outlined in our research agenda. And it's important information to know if you plan to submit an application if you plan to submit an application for research funding in the NEA, that these are the types of questions that we are really interested in supporting. So we're interested in learning more about the measurable impacts of the arts on individuals, communities, and the economy, et cetera. How arts contribute to healing and revitalization of communities, the state of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in the arts, and how the US arts ecosystem, such as arts organizations and venues, artists and arts workers, and participants and learners, is adapting to and responding to social, economic, and technological changes and challenges to the sector. So those are sort of the main or broader questions and topics that we are interested in funding over the next 5 years. We support research projects in a variety of different disciplines. So you saw 2 different disciplines today. We also support research studies in economics, other types of medicine and health fields, education, arts management, community planning, et cetera. And we support research methods in a lot of different sectors that use qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method designs, community-based participatory research methods, quasi-experimental and experimental designs, case studies, and single group designs, just to name a few different methods that we support. So I'll first overview our research grants in the arts program. And for the rest of this presentation, just keep in mind that I'm referencing guidelines from our previous grant cycle. So some of these items may change in our next round of grant making, and we expect to release new guidelines in January 2023. The Research Grants in the Arts program funds research studies that encompass a wide range of areas that focus on the value and/or impact of the arts for individuals and communities. HBCUs are eligible applicants. You may submit more than 1 application under this program each year, and you can also apply to other NEA funding opportunities during the same year. Oh, it looks like it jumped. Research grants in the arts funding requests may range from $10,000 to $100,000, and they do require a non-federal one-to-one match. So if you request $100,000, you must show another $100,000 in match from other sources. So our other research funding program, NEA Research Labs, you just heard from 2 principal investigators who are award recipients under this program. We support transdisciplinary research partnerships that engage in a broader research agenda through this program. So we have 3 distinct topic areas: arts in entrepreneurship and innovation, arts, creativity, cognition, and learning, and arts, health, social, emotional well-being. So those are the 3 areas that you can apply under to start a research lab. Research labs are intended to serve as hubs or centers of excellence in the domain of interest. As a result, they're required to do a number of activities under this type of award. So labs will develop a research agenda, conduct a keystone study and other studies, produce research reports, and disseminate products, data, tools, or services for the public, researchers, and practitioners. So you also saw from our 2 presenters that they are indeed creating different tools and data sets for other researchers and practitioners to use. Eligible applicants are US institutions of higher education, including HBCUs. And unique to this program is that eligible applicants are also those that have never participated in an NEA research lab before. And our lab awardees are listed on our website. There are additional application requirements to consider. The research labs require a partnership that involves multiple organizations. Partnering organizations are not required to meet the same eligibility requirements as the official applicant organization, but one of the partners has to be a nonprofit arts organization. In addition, the project team must be interdisciplinary and include members from 2 or more research specialties. You may, like the Research Grants in the Arts program, submit more than one application under this program each year. And you can also apply to other NEA funding opportunities during the same year. Research awards are between $100,000 and $200,000 and also require the 1-to-1 non-federal match. And what's really unique about this program is that it allows for non-competitive subsequent awards for up to 4 times. So theoretically, a lab could be supported for up to 10 years. More detail about renewal options, as well as other technical requirements and activities, can be found in our guidelines. And just to recap, both of our research programs have an annual deadline in March. Guidelines for our new cycles are posted a couple months prior to the deadline. And if you actually have general questions about our other grant programs, please email hbcu@arts.gov. And then guidelines for any of our programs at the NEA are also at www.arts.gov/grants. I will briefly go over how the steps to get from application to award notification. So there's an application process that includes 2 parts: a short form that is submitted through grants.gov, and then a full application that is submitted through the NEA's applicant portal. Then the application, once it's received, goes through a panel review process. And there are multiple levels to that. Level 1 is a citizen panel, which is made up of experts in the field. And the panel is diverse in terms of geography, gender, ethnicity, and expertise. And panelists review applications based on the review criteria that are outlined in the guidelines for a given program. Level 2, the panel recommendations are then submitted to the National Council on the Arts, and they review and approve every award. And then the NEA chair signs the approved grants. Application calendars for each of our programs can be found in the specific guidelines for those programs. So just some tips about applying to the NEA. Some things to keep in mind. First, carefully read through guidelines before you begin. On our website, there are a number of additional applicant resources that are available, and I encourage you to seek them out if you choose to apply to any of our programs. Work with your team and partners to answer each component of the application. Check in with your organizations, or in this case, universities, research administration office. They'll definitely be able to help you and provide guidance on what they need from you in order to submit your application. Consider the research or the review criteria as you prepare for your application. Start early. Generally speaking, our guidelines don't change substantially from year to year, so you can get a better indication of what will be expected on an application months ahead of time. Depending on the program, we provide opportunities to receive panel feedback on your proposal after it has gone through a panel review, and this is for successful applicants and applicants who were not selected for an award. Another great way to learn about what panelists are looking for when they review applications is to actually volunteer as a panelist yourself. So I'll talk more on this in a second. And just a reminder that we are definitely here to help. Contact us with any of your questions, and we're available to talk throughout the year, not just during the application process itself. We are always looking for new voices to bring to our panel process. It is a great way to connect with us and really learn what the other process is like from the other side. We have been told that it's a great professional development opportunity, and panelists really get a sense of what creates a really strong proposal. If you're interested, you can fill out a form on our website at the URL listed here. It'll be dropped in the chat as well, and feel free to contact us directly. And speaking of contact information, if you have general questions about different awards programs from the NEA in more of a general sense, please reach out to hbcu@arts.gov. Tamika, in particular, is a staff member who monitors that email, and she's an excellent resource. You can get connected with other NEA staff that can be of most assistance. If you have questions about research programs specifically, please reach out to us at NEA Research Grants at arts.gov. Melissa, who is on this presentation, as well as I, monitor this email year-round, and we're here to answer any questions. With that, we have just very few, where did my Q&A slide go? There. We have just a few seconds for Q&A, and I just want to see if there's any coming through here. Let's see, and I will actually stop sharing my screen so I can see your faces. Oh, we have a question for Ashton. Is it important to instruct people on what to wear when you are doing the motion capture work?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yes, actually, we found out early on that with the type of technology that we're using, people need to wear reflective or bright clothing. So we asked them to wear white or gray or just light colored clothing in general so the cameras can capture their movement more easily.
That's really interesting. And now we have, let's see, a question for Bob. How can the scale bank developed at the lab help artists and researchers gather data for their arts events?
Yeah, so I think, thanks very much for asking. Basically, I think most arts organizers are not psychology researchers. So by having the scale bank available, you can browse through and look for the concepts that you want to look for. So just as an example, the Sound Health Network people wanted to measure awe. And so we have 7 scales that have the keyword awe included there. So you can just search through, identify what the different scales are. And then you can see how they've been used, what their properties are, how many items they have, and what the items are. So you can actually look at the content and get a feel for what that is in deciding what kind of item content you might want to use. We're also available to consult with anybody. So all you have to do is go to our website and get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to help people browse through the scale bank and come up with the kind of scales and items and self-reports that they may want to use.
Yeah, it's cool to learn that you can actually quantify awe and measure it.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I think we have just one more question that I'm seeing coming through here. Is the NEA engaging with HBCUs through other non-grants activities? I can take this one. I'm glad you asked. We actually are in the process of starting a brand new research study that is really looking at the arts and cultural infrastructure at HBCUs and their partnerships to communities, to local communities, and to kind of see the connection between the arts and cultural infrastructure that HBCUs have and how that's translating to local workforce jobs in creative sectors. So we're excited to get started on that in the coming year. With that, you have our contact information. I just want to thank our speakers again, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Builder, for your time today. And thank you for everybody for tuning in. This will also be posted and recorded and posted. Thanks so much, everybody, and take care.
Thank you all.